Hello, my friend, and welcome to the window of the study, where you can see one of my many water features after a spring rain. I find the sound very calming and relaxing, and you can see the fish darting about. So I thought I would give you this calming video today with the atmospheric sounds of the pond and the birds and the fountain, and you can watch the fish coming up to the surface and the water lilies beginning to put their leaves out for the summer season. Watching fish swimming around doing their fishy business, and indeed any wild animal and nature, always reminds me of a story in a Taoist text by Chuang Tzu, a Chinese philosopher who lived in the 4th century BC. So, along with the sounds of the pond today, I'm going to talk a little bit about this story by Chuang Tzu and some Eastern philosophy. And I'm going to put a shout out to ASMR Chess, who so kindly played a couple of games with me and included them in his recent 5-hour-long chess video. His channel is one that I've been watching for quite some time. He's definitely one of my favorite chess commentators, and I find his comments and videos very relaxing, so I've always loved his channel. I'd like to also thank all of my new subscribers and those who have come over from the chess video as well. It's a real pleasure to have everyone interested in these relaxing and informative videos. They are fun to make, and I hope they give you some pleasure as well. Chuang Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, lived during the era of what was called the 100 Schools of Thought in the 4th century BC. It was a time of great upheaval, warring states, and also of philosophers and itinerant scholars. These scholars were employed by different state rulers, and they would advise these rulers on their government, on the way they would manage their administration, on diplomacy, and also on war. Chuang Tzu's writings form one of the foundation texts for the Taoist philosophy. The Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian writes in his Records of the Great Historian that Chuang Tzu was an admirable writer and skillful composer, and even the ablest scholars of his day could not escape his satire, nor reply to it, while he allowed and enjoyed himself with his sparkling, dashing style. And thus it was that the greatest man, even kings and princes could not use him for their purposes. So Chuang Tzu was full of wit, but also insight, and more importantly, the intelligence to express it in very intellectual ways. And the Taoist philosophy, of course, is still debated to this day, as is classical philosophy, which is the beauty of these topics. Chuang Tzu had a lifelong friend, Tzu. Tzu was a logician and was Chuang Tzu's friendly opponent. He often played an intellectual foil and argued for an alternative viewpoint, or perhaps criticized Taoist perspectives and provided some humor in the dialogues that they had. One of their dialogues is about fish, and it concerns the subjectivity of happiness, but it goes quite a bit deeper than that. And this is one I would like to read to you today. Chuang Tzu and Tzu were strolling along the dam of the Hao River when Chuang Tzu said, "See how the minnows come out and dart around where they please. That's what fish really enjoy." Tzu said, "You're not a fish. How do you know what fish enjoy?" Chuang Tzu said, "You are not I. So how do you know I don't know what fish enjoy?" Tzu said, "I'm not you. So I certainly don't know what you know. On the other hand, you're certainly not a fish. So that still proves that you don't know what fish enjoy." Chuang Tzu said, "Let's go back to your original question, please. You asked me how I know what fish enjoy. So you already knew I knew it when you asked the question. I know it by standing here beside the Hao." So through this charming debate, you can see the friendly rivalry between Chuang Tzu and Tzu. The biggest question is, who won this debate? It has a little bit of the elements of Plato and Socrates, but we also see a wry humor, but at the same time asking some very in-depth questions. Chuang Tzu's last statement put the matter to rest for the argument, but for the concept, there still remain some questions to be answered, some thoughts to be explored. Did Chuang Tzu win the debate? I think we can agree that he did. Was it only by some devious way, some grammatical or semantic trick? Or is there something more profound in this last statement that Hui Tzu knew that he knew when he asked the question? How does he know what makes fish happy? He describes what makes things happy for these fish, and the way he describes it is just saying that the fish come and dart around wherever they please. These fish are doing their natural activity. This is what fish do, and Chuang Tzu is observing this. And this simplicity of nature being itself, doing what it naturally does, becomes Chuang Tzu's definition of what makes things happy. What is happiness? It's that natural expression of what is intrinsic to that thing or creature. It is that individual thing doing what it normally does, the expression of its very nature, and that makes it true or right. Humans, however, have other motives for doing the things they do. Our choices almost inevitably lead us to do things that are not natural and are probably contrary to happiness. So that ability to choose what we do and how we act is, in humans, just as natural as swimming around in the water, darting about, is to a fish. And that human nature becomes a source of unhappiness rather than happiness. However, Chuang Tzu is implying that this self-awareness will lead to recognition of nature and therefore the happiness. The other part of the Taoist argument here is the knowledge. Not necessarily how he knows, because we know he knows the fish are happy because they're doing what naturally comes to fish. But it's the knowing. How does Hui Tzu know that Chuang Tzu knows? How does Chuang Tzu, for that matter, know that he knows what makes fish happy? Chuang Tzu responded to Hui Tzu in a way that Hui Tzu would understand, Hui Tzu being a logician. And therefore putting an end to the discussion. However, did Hui Tzu think he had run the debate? It's quite possible that he thought Chuang Tzu had put himself in a corner and only tried to get out of it with this little semantic trick. But it's also possible that they both walked away from the river How, deep in thought about how one knows what one knows. How is one certain of knowing anything? Here, Hui Tzu, the logician, has confined his ability to understand what he knows by his own logic, his own logical way of approach. He knows what makes fish happy because it's natural, but such knowledge is rejected by his logical mind. According to his logic, Chuang Tzu cannot know what makes fish happy, but he also cannot know what Chuang Tzu knows. For Chuang Tzu, it is not about knowing or understanding. It is about the simple act of being, the experience of being and doing what is natural. And that is where happiness resides. Therefore, he doesn't feel the need to prove to Hui Tzu what makes fish happy, or that he has knowledge of what makes fish happy. It is this nature that imbues him with the certainty that fish are doing what comes natural, and Chuang Tzu is doing what comes natural. Therefore, he does not need the logic or the proof. That is why he has turned Hui Tzu's own logical thought progression back upon him. The logician would ask, how you know something? How do you know? From what perspective or viewpoint are you looking at a problem? But Chuang Tzu knows that you don't need this logic to be certain of something. And this indicative of our own intuition, our own feelings, the vibes we get from our own observance, observing the world with our eyes, with our ears, sight, sound, smell, all of our senses, and also the vibes that we have. Rather than reasoning things out, we can just accept what we see, and therein lies what Hui Tzu would call knowledge. Observing what happens in nature every day is the happiness that Chuang Tzu speaks of. So strolling by the river, Chuang Tzu knows things. He knows that he knows these things. He knows what makes fish happy. He knows how rivers flow, simply because he exists and he observes. This knowing doesn't come from reasoning things out. It comes from being in nature. Nature being what happens naturally, what occurs naturally. So the fact that he exists tells him that he knows what existence is. He knows what happiness is. He knows what occurs, and he doesn't have to ask any questions to prove to himself this knowledge. This is what is called the illumination of the obvious. Fish are doing what fish do, and these two philosophers observe that simply by standing on the banks of the river How. As we observe fish in the pond, doing what they do. So I hope this has relaxed your senses and your mind and given you some happiness in your day. As always, be good to yourself, be kind to others and to the animals, and be extraordinary.